My name's Dr. Derek Robinson. I am a senior researcher and policy analyst at the Center on Policy Initiatives. My background is I'm trained as an economist. I was a natural resource and environmental economist before. I worked for a few universities, University of North Florida as an economist. I worked at Tuskegee University, Auburn University, University of San Diego most recently, University of California Division of Agriculture and Natural Resources, and I've focused on a lot of different issues, from everything from business development around agricultural products and agricultural production, business development around non-marketable land use, so conservation easements, etc. And then to things like worker justice issues, focusing on how can we get better kind of benefits for workers? How do we make sure to utilize different policies that are taking place at the local, state, and governmental level to help out communities in general? How do we make sure that those are accessible to everyone and that we use them in the way that they should be used to kind of increase public good or public benefit?
Oh, wow, that's great. Well, hey, we're basically doing this for our viewers, our clients, and kind of just talk about here in local. We're based in San Diego. Tell me, with this global shutdown here, let's just bring it to a micro level of San Diego. What are you seeing economically right now that's happening on a daily basis and every day that we are shut down? What's it doing to our economy?
It's really taken down a lot of different components to it. I think there are a lot of interlaced pieces. So like when we can think about one of the largest industries that are in San Diego right now, the tourism industry is being very heavily impacted by this. We think about that one of the largest sites where a lot of professional associations like to have meetings and bring in a lot of business folks in. The convention center is now being utilized as a homeless or shelterless person transitional facility. So when you think about that, things like that are what's happening, because that's considered on an economic view the best use of that particular land at that particular moment. That means that we are like not specifically in dire straits, but there are a lot of things happening that we're trying to really put a safety net around to make sure things don't go too far below where we would like them to be. You think about the different food, restaurant, bar industries, occupations that are closed down or being affected right now. And all these places that we're talking about have workers that are paying into our economy. They're renting homes. They're going out and having localized spending. They're going and patronizing the businesses in which some of them even work within. So we're going to see a lot of loss in terms of when we're thinking about regional GDP. We'll see some losses there when we're thinking about our consumption numbers, when we think about our sales across some of these different industries. We think about our retail sales. Some of our kind of larger retail sales establishments are not able to be in operations, especially some of our local ones, right? So you think like, yeah, Target is cool. They're still able to kind of work it out. But you think about a lot of our boutique places. When you think of some of our businesses, like up in the Bird Rock area, you think of some of our like small nestled communities, Normal Heights, Kensington, North Park. All these places are kind of pretty dependent on our capacity to be able to go out and enjoy leisure time. And with so many people kind of being furloughed or working from home during the shelter in, they're not able to go out and pass those dollars out. And so we will really need some type of additional supports. Not really sure exactly where they should come from, but we will need some additional supports here in San Diego, just like everywhere else.
Completely. Now, what do you think, Derek, is going to happen with the businesses that were running and humming along, and they've been shut down now almost 3 weeks, I believe, where we're at right now? We're April 3rd today. Take that back, April 4th, and Saturday, April 4th, I think we shut down mostly around the 12th, 13th of last month. How many businesses do you think are going to be able to come on, even if we're going to be going to the end of this month shelter in place at the end of April? How many do you think are really going to be able to get out of the hole and get back to running again?
It'll be difficult for me to precisely estimate what that would be, but what I have been seeing is that a lot of businesses have begun trying to figure out different ways that they can kind of stay employable to or stay marketable to our communities. So I would say, you know, at the least 50-50 are going to be able to try to figure out some other way, right? That's always the good thing about businesses and business owners is that many of them are very innovative. They know how to move on their feet. They know how to change and be dynamic when the time is right. So I think the ones who were capitalized well, who are already had good margins, weren't on the fringes with cash flow, et cetera, those are going to be some of the businesses that we see that are going to be able to make it through something like this, even if they do have to furlough or lay off some of their employees. But the other businesses that were already working at the margins, already things were tight, they're going to have a tough time through this period, kind of keeping things going. And really that's some of why the efforts were put into the CARES Act, to be able, which is the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act that was just recently passed. And it had about $350 billion for aid available to small businesses specifically.
Yeah.
So there's opportunity for San Diegans to make sure that they try to take advantage of that, where especially if they're in need. There's also been monetary policy changes that have been to reassure that banks will continue to allow access to loanable funds. So I think people who have good kind of credit history, they'll be good with their institutions and financial institutions in terms of having access to capital. They may need to make sure to mention that they're specifically being impacted by the coronavirus and that they are seeking coronavirus aid. I think that's like an actual lever that kind of maybe needs to be in place or is maybe in place to help start those or facilitate those kind of helps that corporations, some of the larger financial institutions are offering out there. Right. And that's as well to consumers. If you're having some issues as a consumer, you need to maybe talk to your financial institution and mention that to them. The federal government is trying to really make sure that they're capitalized in the proper way, or the Federal Reserve Bank is trying to make sure and assure them of that. So you should really try to make sure that you are standing up for what you need in terms of kind of what you are expecting to kind of come out of this and what types of supports that you are expecting as an individual.
Yeah. And that just passed, what, $2 trillion just passed last week, correct?
Yes, that's correct. Or I believe it was on the 30th, maybe of
crazy.
Of
It
this
sounds
week.
like there's a lot of fat in that package as well. And we're talking about 350 billion going to the people, and then where's the rest go, really?
Yeah, so we have about 500 billion going towards industry bailouts. We have about 300 billion going out to cash payments to those households. We've already heard about that. That's what the cost is of about sending that $1,200 out to everyone, and then plus $500 for children. We have about 150 billion going for direct aid to state and local governments. So this is to help support our state and local governments in terms of their efforts, in terms of helping to stabilize if you have issues with health systems in your areas, to help kind of stabilize that, and any other extra costs that those governments are going to have to take on to be able to kind of stabilize things in their area and kind of respond to this emergency. And then there's about 7 billion for homeless assistance grants, public housing, and rental assistance, as well as there's other things going in there and other supports of some other kind of public payments that we traditionally make that are going to kind of increase in cost over this time of sheltering in. When you think about stuff went into public broadcasting, national public radio, et cetera, to make sure that like they're getting the supports they need, because those are kind of institutions that get impacted when people stop spending money, when people can't work. They also, because they're so interlinked with kind of that altruistic giving model.
Right. Well, it makes it very interesting. And so those people that definitely were in trying to stay unpolitical here, but, you know, those haters of Donald Trump, et cetera, and now they're kind of going, where's my check? You know, it's kind of a interesting dynamic that's going on.
Yeah, I think it's just, you know, we're hitting in a time where a lot of people haven't prepared for this. Just like businesses, a lot of people live on the margins as well in their households. And so When you have a large proportion of your population who is living at the margins, it's very difficult when a shock hits you like this, right? So this is, and they're really staying non-political about it. This is really what we expect out of government, right? Like, we expect some level of support when things like this happen. So we were hoping that we could get a little bit more utilization of the Federal Emergency Management Agency, right?
Mm-hmm.
They've had some cuts over this last time of where we've really tried to figure out ways that we can kind of streamline government is a good way to kind of think about it, where we needed to make certain trade-off decisions, as economists would put it,
Right.
and try to really kind of center in onto, well, what do we need now versus what do we think we'll need in the future? And of course, no one could see that a global pandemic was in our horizon, right? Like, and fortunately, a lot of state and local governments, especially here in the state of California, and especially in local governments of San Diego County and the city of San Diego, have really made a valiant attempt in trying to figure out how to manage through this process. A lot of the other smaller cities, Chula Vista, Escondido, Vista, San Marcos, National Cities, El Cajones, La Mesas, they are also coming up with kind of strategies for how to work through this. And I think everyone is really trying to figure out what's the best way that we can all move forward, whatever the future is going to look like for us, right?
Yeah, that's going to be crazy. Now, we were talking about the discussion over who all's expected to be impacted by the eviction moratorium ordinance. Can you talk to that?
Mm-hmm.
A little bit, what's going on?
Currently right now, the rent and eviction moratorium that's been passed at the city level is for both residential and commercial tenants.
Mm-hmm.
It's basically to kind of put in steps ways that you can't actually kind of go through the legal process. So what it would take to officially get someone to vacate a premises, but you also have to make it known to start off first with your landowner or the landlord who you are paying your rents to. You need
Right.
to make sure to alert them of what your situation is and kind of first start working it through it with them. I believe it's that we get till like either May or June or some point in the future, maybe 90 days or so is what moratorium is. And at the end of that, you will still be expected to pay those monies. So while this is a idea that is really meant to help everyone, and it is kind of giving some short-term solutions for those who lost the opportunity to continue being employed. It's going to become very difficult, even when the moratorium is up, to be able to kind of cover those potential rents. And so I think what we're going to see is that there are going to be renters who have to, there's going to be a lot of kind of transitional, frictional kind of things happening in the rental markets in terms of people having to find cheaper places to live, maybe having to move to a whole nother place. So you might see some of that. Also, I think it's an opportunity where landowners can really try to also talk to their financial institutions to kind of help them try to cover their needs as well. So they need to try to also do that, so that way they can. The best thing for us in the long term is to make sure that you get like long-term, stabilized, financially secure tenants. That's what everybody wants, right? So anything you can try to help to find that, you would be helpful. You're going to notice that, again, a lot of the people who are living at the margins in terms of their household budgeting, they won't be able to kind of mitigate through this process, even with the rent moratoriums that were put into place. And they, while here in San Diego, they weren't as I guess not. I wouldn't say not as helpful, but they definitely made sure to kind of hold everybody accountable when this is all said and done. So any people who are looking to say, oh, that this is an opportunity for me to have this free ride, I would suggest that you kind of reevaluate and reassess your situation and kind of really make a decision based on a proper assessment of that. These monies will still be due,
Right.
and you may need, if the only thing you have for you is in your best interest to negotiate with your landlords or whoever is the property owner of the place where you're living.
Yeah, that's a great one. And you talk about that, and we have to thank, Gavin Newsom for that. And then Kevin Faulkner tweeted it saying that no one's going to be evicted, but are they going to cover the mortgages for those landlords that are due to pay the mortgage and giving the renter, it's a tough one. And I feel for the landowners and for the renters and such, but it's really interesting how government is playing such a huge role in this. And I'm going to ask you a question here about that and it's going to get into politics. What you think
Yeah,
that
of course, I understand.
the forbearance of mortgages that my wife is a lender, Jeanette, and she was talking about, yeah, you're going to get 3 months of forbearance, but on the fourth month, everything's due.
Mm-hmm,
I
mm-hmm.
mean, you haven't been making payments, and how are you going to save that money if you haven't been working? And then at the fourth month, then they're going to start, foreclosures. So
Yeah,
at
that
least that
was
we,
one of the. No, that was just one of the things that I really personally, as an individual, would feel that they would have really tried to focus on, just to kind of look at another local area that did a very similar thing in the city of LA. They did a very similar thing, but they also put together a fund to where people could be able to try to apply for those funds specifically on the landowner side, so that way they would be able to kind of cover their costs during this kind of rent forbearance. I think
right,
that was a missed opportunity here locally that we could have tried to take advantage of. I also, yeah, I also think that this is just a real opportunity where we all have to rethink. Well, what are we? How far to the margins can we be within trying to kind of establish ourselves as using land ownership as a mechanism for residual income? How much we have to live at the margins in terms of thinking about what are the things that we value as far as preferences in terms of rental places to live. We have to reevaluate what do we do in terms of future development projects and what do we incentivize uh, in terms of, right now, what types of community block grants can we help to facilitate to encourage developers to go after developments that can house the workers and the different people who you have living around you who we all need services from, but they can't always have the opportunity to minimize their cost of providing those services the way some of us can,
right,
right? And myself being included in that, right? We think about, I'm able to work from home. Fortunately, I have a capacity to be able to still, manage my household, and so how do we give that opportunity to everyone, from the person who's busting our tables to the people who we're expecting to make the high level decisions of capital management, right? Like,
yeah, that's
how do we how do we bring all ourselves together so that way we could be more prepared during times like this and not have to be like, oh my goodness, what are we going to do about all these people who've been marginalized during this time, right?
right.
I think this is an opportunity for us to kind of look into that. But yeah, we could have done more, and it's going to be a very difficult time where we kind of all have to come together, landowners, renters, etc., lenders, to be able to say, hey, what can we do to make sure that our model continues on? Otherwise, we're going to have to really start rethinking models and really get into huge systems changes. And those can be costly, both monetarily, socially, etc. And is that really what we're focused? Is that really where we should be focusing in on? I don't have those answers, but if we don't come together in some form or fashion, those are going to be the types of answers that we're going to need to have.
Yeah, and especially when they're talking $2 trillion, and probably by the time we get to June, July, that's probably not going to be enough realistically.
Yeah, yeah. I think this is just to really mainly this is trying to be the net, right? And just like any other net, it's going to allow some stuff to fall through, right? Like, because you're just trying to estimate or predict what type of nets you're going to need. What are you actually trying to catch here, right? And I don't know if we all really realize how much of a free fall can happen, how much of an exponential downturn can happen, and what it could look like. And as we're seeing it right now, when we look at like unemployment numbers, and I've been tracking some of the weekly unemployment insurance claims here locally. And when I mean locally, I just mean in the state, because that's as local as we can get to it publicly. We see that California hasn't quite had the same kind of level of deprivation that the rest of the nation witnessed during these last couple of weeks. While not taking away from the depth of what was happening, just saying that we were fortunate enough to, some kind of way as a state, not be impacted in the same way that a lot of other more heavily impacted areas throughout the nation were, if I could put it that way. And so,
You're talking about deaths now, or are you talking about economic?
no, I'm talking about not disability, but unemployment insurance.
Got
Right.
it.
And I'm talking about the amount of claims that, so you can go to the Division of Labor site, the Department of Labor site, and you can see the weekly claims on unemployment insurance. And maybe like a week or two ago, there was a spike of 3.3 million nationwide, right? And they were talking about what type of increase that was from week to week, and how we haven't seen this since this period of time. And many articles talked about it. I can't remember all of them and what they were saying, but what it made me do was look at what California's numbers look like, and that we in California see the same kind of nationwide trend. And it wasn't quite as sharp as the rest of the nation was, right? So some of us may have just been more capitalized. Who knows the reasons why, but hopefully that will continue, and we can kind of maintain a fairly strong economy here in California, being such a large economy, just impacting even the entire globe, right? Like, it's not just
40 million Californians. I mean, I think we're the sixth largest GDP in the world, correct?
fifth last time I checked even. So I think we're still moving up as we continue to grow stronger. And so that's a good positive note. And I think I think we just really need to, like I say, come together and figure out what are we going to do? Like, how are we going to reopen our borders to migrant workers who come in annually, seasonally, put our food? Because right now we have food and stuff in the grocery stores, but as we continue to move down and this crisis continues to increase across the nation, we're going to start seeing that we're going to have a kind of higher demand of those food supplies. And if we don't have access to the workers who are traditionally able to go and work in these places, but right now because of this crisis are not, we're going to need to do something. Like, we're going to be in some serious trouble when people can't go and buy food at the supermarket, one of the essential places. So yeah, there's a lot of different pieces to this.
And it's increasing, and we're just kind of learning it every day. But in the last 2 weeks, I heard 10 million people have filed for unemployment. Is that somewhat around the ballpark right now?
That's how much it's increased in terms of the latest claims for this month, right? So that was a month. That's less aggregating some of the weekly numbers there. But yes, that's pretty significant, right? When you think about that, 10 million workers, that's a pretty good amount of people. And some of them, some of that number, not that we expect it to happen, but some of those workers are often seasonal style workers where they traditionally can have these layoff times when things would get slow. Or I think the biggest thing is that there's a lot of uncertainty about when will these workers be allowed to come back to work. And if we have 10% of our population who can only access, what is it, I think like a quarter of whatever their previous take-home wages were, that's a huge loss in our consumption numbers. And considering that consumption is the largest contributor to GDP, I think we really need to think about, well, how will that impact us, right? Like there's a lot of dominoes that are falling and that have already fallen that we don't see yet. And we just need to be prepared for what things might look like and how we might have to be dynamic and be ready to invest into newer technologies that before didn't used to maybe make economical sense, but now it kind of does, right? And I'm pretty sure that there'll probably be some other kind of stimulus packages, like, you know, if this net, like, let's say for instance, this net doesn't capture everything we need, there are other levers that, you know, we can have pulled to be able to access things. But I think, you know, the biggest one about stabilizing our financial systems is going to be the thing that we captured that we didn't capture fast enough in our last recessionary period, right? That's one of the things that the Federal Reserve didn't act on as fast as it did this time, right?
Yeah. Well, and this is probably getting a little politics here, but I'm going to ask your opinion here on this in your eyes. But I'm just looking at the John Hopkins CDC numbers right now. 1.192 million people have been infected. 245 have totally recovered, and 64,000 deaths so far. And granted, you know,
Mm-hmm.
in America, how long? I think I had it in January, honestly, of all the symptoms. We were on an international cruise. We got back, I'm telling you, felt like I was going to die, definitely, but didn't and overcame it. I'm 50, and they say the recovery rate of 99.7% of anybody 50 and under, but granted, some of the stats are showing, but 64,000 deaths throughout 181 countries. Now, with that said, I heard the biggest reason why Trump has fallen into this is because it was politically. Basically, he was cornered into it. He didn't want the overwhelming amount of people going to the hospital, ventilators, beds that we don't have, that would kill other people that really needed help. What are your thoughts on that? I mean, is it worth a global economy, America, to go down into the worst recession almost that we're kind of hearing right now for these kind of numbers where the regular flu kills 50 to 80,000 people a year just in America with 330 million people? We're talking around 181 countries right now that are 64,000 deaths. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
In reality, I think it's like when did you want to see not when would we want to see those people removing themselves from the economy, right? Like we want to see them be who can readily re-input it back into the economy at the same switch that we click to kind of take them out, or we want to see X amount of people lost from the economy, sick, unable to come back in their same functions, in their same forms, a complete kind of retransition of, you know, what everything would look like in terms of, you know, people may not want to focus on that we have potential failures within our healthcare system that are, you know, at the systems level, and something like people making a run on hospitals could kind of really showcase that, and we have no way to prepare, no way to kind of mitigate that off. We don't have the same type of levers like when people decide that they're going to go on a run at the bank, and we have ways that we can kind of try to stave that off. We're not really there yet in terms of the way our health systems are. So whether or not I think the executive level federal government is thinking about that in that particular way, with some of the ways that they kind of think about other things that they don't mind allowing to come into the kind of public perception and public hearing, etc. I'm not sure of, but I do, from the people who I've discussed with who are the people I've discussed this with who are in healthcare professions, they agree with some of the measures we're taking in terms of how many people could negatively have been impacted. I think like right now we're talking about, how many people are impacted by the flu, et cetera, et cetera. I think though with this particular pandemic that's going on right now, we're really afraid because we don't know a lot about it. And I think people are just trying the best kind of things that they can try at this point, and they've seen what has worked in other places. So we're just kind of trying that out at the moment. But if we won't be able to ever tell that which one would have been better, right? there'll be an economist one day who will be looking at countries that did stuff, countries that didn't do anything, and they'll probably run difference and difference models to see what was the impact to GDP in those particular areas versus, kind of do this is a great time for a natural experiment. So if anyone is wanting to set up a natural experiment like that, talk to me. I'm an economist who thinks in that way. So we can look at those things, but yeah, I'm not sure was this the best move or not. We won't really know, but I think people were really just concerned with humanity and lives, and that kind of what pulled the heartstrings in terms of what we should do and what type of action we should take. It was one of those maybe interdisciplined or interthoughtful ideas.
Right. And it is a tough answer to the question. Nevertheless, I've got some stats. I was on with Tony Robbins yesterday on a Zoom with him on a mastermind call. And every election year, there seems to be a disease. Tell me if these some stats that you believe in. But SARS was 2004, the avian flu was 2008, swine in 2010, MERS in 2012, Ebola in 2014, Zika in 2016, Ebola 2018, and now the coronavirus is a contagious factor. 2 of SARS was 4, measles is 18. We're talking the stats of going up, but corona has a cure rate of 99.7% for those under 50 and infects. Coronavirus spread is leveling off. This is a viral pneumonia being hyped as the Black Plague before an election.
Mm-hmm.
2.2 billion mentions in the news since this has come on out. So, I mean, people are in hysteria. Do you think that the media has something to do with that?
Well, that's in the way that the question is asked. Yes, of course. Like we learn off we have a thing called social learning theory. We learn from model behavior. So if, when I watch TV, whatever you show me on that TV in terms of how humans are interacting, that's going to help me either uplift that or not believe that, right? So, of course, what we're seeing on the media is impacting our reactions. I just also think that potentially there's always some type of thing happening in this global society that never used to be able to communicate and pass on information in the way that we are now in the past, right? Like in the 90s, we didn't have a way that I could send a live video of some type of political event, non-political event, like virality of information is blown what we do up exponentially, and we're still trying to adjust. So yeah, do those things probably impact? Yes. Do I think that they were intentionally trying to think about like, oh, let's throw this in for election season? Maybe not in that particular way, but within the vein of thinking about that, things do become more critical for political and more so the elected political officials during election seasons. Yes, the public does seem to increase their level of how they want to think and critically think about government, about public good distribution, about the benefits coming from those public goods. That definitely does increase during election seasons because that's the time when it's basically like pay the piper. If people agree, if people don't agree, this is why political strategists come out with all these different campaigns during that time to really try to shift people's narratives because, day to day, most of us don't notice the direct impact of our federally elected officials, right? We mostly see the impact of our local officials, right? So, the narrative always stays at the federal level, but it really, I think it should be more focused on what's happening locally.
It's true. No, very true. Hey, so last question here, Derek, and I really appreciate your time and your professionalism and your thoughts. Who will be the new wealth creators post-pandemic, and how will the recent loanable funds change and alter the businesses and the community landscape?
Yes. So I think the people who are going to generate wealth off this is the people who were well capitalized, who were probably thinking in terms of fiscal conservative kind of ideas for their actual household or for their personal or business or brand portfolio. The people who are really ready to innovate, people who are already making investments in terms of when we think about mechanicalization of their industrial process of whatever it is they're making. So when you think about people who have found ways to streamline inventory, when you're talking about actual places that are producing products, manufacturers, even when you think about our food retail establishments that are making, making food for us to eat right then and there. Those types of people who are already thinking about those investments, who weren't living at the margins already. When you think about the farm, a lot of this is going to be corporations to a certain degree. So it's just we would hope for the corporations that have the best practices in terms of how they treat the public and how they treat people and their workers, etc., is what we hope to be there. Will that happen? I'm not sure, but people who are ready and available financially to take on the risk, those are going to be some of the people who are going to kind of benefit from this. I've already been seeing a lot more properties coming up onto different rental markets in terms of going from short-term rentals to a little bit more long-term, because people are trying to already figure out ways to kind of start back driving revenues back off of some of these properties. So yeah, those types of people who are ready to smoothly make a transition into something else, they're going to be some of the people who get to benefit off of this time. And in terms of when I say benefit, potentially the benefit is just not falling down as far as everyone else, right?
Yeah,
that's what we're thinking about it, right?
They're not just sitting at home on the couch eating bonbons and just watching the news. They're kind of out there making moves, right?
Yes, the people who are looking for, hey, what's this new product and service that no one expected, because no one thought that all of a sudden we were going to be stuck at home for the next 6 months or a year or whatever it is. People who can start offering products and technologies to help businesses keep this model going, because I think a lot of businesses are going to appreciate this kind of model of labor supply, being able to transition and have some time where you work more remotely or where you're not just in the office. And it's not about just working from home, but it's about allowing a lot more people who should be kind of out in the field doing what they're doing to release themselves, to feel okay about releasing themselves from an office, from that standard system that we think. If you need to be in your community, if you're doing work in the community, or like you're a data researcher, you can't always just sit at home, download publicly available data, and crunch up the numbers with some complex statistical analysis and publish. You need to sometimes go out there, get some qualitative data, get some just general observations to help you understand what types of hypotheses should you be testing as a social or behavioral or political or public policy scientist, right? Like, so I think some of these technologies that'll be developed, some of these new models, new systems that we'll come out with are really going to be focused around how can we improve that, right?
That's expanding my mind a little bit more when you think about it and you're not in it like you are, in different industries. We can keep going on and on. I'm in real estate, and I think about what it's going to do basically to the commercial markets with the high-rise buildings and all the office spaces with people that had to drive 30, 45 minutes, some an hour one way in traffic, and then another to get home, that are now working from home remotely. That's really going to change, I think, the industry in the commercial space. And also another one, we can talk about this more, but we got to get on to our next call. But just the whole global footprint of what's like LA and India, I was even hearing, they've never seen blue skies in decades. And now you're seeing pristine skies because they've shut down completely. So going to be interesting.
Yeah, all the human ecosystem changes and services that we will see globally, it's going to be very, like you say, very interesting to see what comes out of all this. And I'm really optimistic. I think, like, as a human species, we have shown to be extraordinarily resilient. And I think this will just be another one of those opportunities for us to show that resiliency and really give us an opportunity to show how we can show up for one another. I think we really should focus on showing up for one another during this time, and let's focus on that.
I appreciate it. And I love you and Alana. Thank you so much, brother, for your time. We'll be in touch. Derek is one of my neighbors here in San Diego, and I'll see you shortly.
Yeah, thank you, Carlos. Thanks for the opportunity. Much love and peace, brother.
All right, we'll see you later. Take care.